The grand chamber stretched out like a crystal cathedral, its walls made of materials that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Commander Jake Morrison walked slowly toward the center platform, his boots making soft sounds against the smooth floor. Above him, floating seats held representatives from 47 different alien species. Some had scales, some had fur, and some looked like they were made of pure light contained in glass bottles. They all watched him with expressions that Jake had learned to recognize over the past few weeks. They thought he was amusing, like a child who had wandered into a room full of adults. Jake stopped at the center and looked up at the assembled aliens. He wore his dress uniform, dark blue with silver buttons, and on his chest were the medals he had earned during his 20 years of military service. The aliens probably did not understand what those medals meant. They had not fought a real war in 800 years. The Vraxian ambassador leaned forward on her floating platform. She was huge, covered in dark armor that looked like an insect's shell, with 6 eyes that blinked independently. When she spoke, her voice came through a translator device that made her sound calm and slightly amused. "Commander Morrison, you have requested that Earth be allowed to join the Galactic Defense Initiative. Is this correct?" "Yes, Ambassador," Jake replied, keeping his voice steady and professional. "Humanity wishes to contribute to the defense of the galaxy." A ripple of sound moved through the chamber. It took Jake a moment to realize that the aliens were laughing. Not the harsh, mocking laughter of enemies, but the gentle, condescending laughter of adults who find a child's ambitions endearing. The sound made something cold settle in Jake's stomach. High Curator Zelvoth rose from the largest platform. The creature was ancient, everyone knew that. It looked like a being made of crystal and light, with a body that seemed to shift colors as it moved. Zelvoth had been alive for over 2,000 years and had seen civilizations rise and fall. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of all those centuries. "Young human," Zelvoth said, and Jake hated that term more than anything. "We appreciate your enthusiasm, but you must understand our position. Earth has only possessed faster-than-light travel for 15 years. Your entire species has existed on a single world for all of your history. You have not faced the trials that forge true defenders of the galaxy." Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his expression neutral. He had expected this. His superior officers had warned him that the aliens would not take humanity seriously. But he had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that they would at least listen. "With respect, Curator," Jake began, "humanity has extensive military experience. We have fought countless wars and survived threats that pushed us to the edge of extinction." Another alien spoke up, this one from the Keltheran delegation. The Keltheran looked like a glowing ball of light inside a transparent sphere. Its voice came through musical, almost singing. "Commander, we do not doubt that your species has experienced conflict. All young species fight among themselves. It is natural. But these are not the scars that matter in the larger galaxy." Zelvoth nodded its crystalline head in agreement. "We have faced the Devourer swarms, Commander Morrison. We have survived the plague wars of the Fourth Epoch, when a biological weapon spread across 300 systems. We have endured the silence when an entire arm of the galaxy went dark and we never discovered why. These are the trials that matter." The Curator gestured with one translucent limb, and a holographic display appeared in the air between them. It showed scenes of ancient battles, alien fleets engaging strange enemies, worlds burning and being rebuilt. "What has humanity endured that compares to this? You have fought with primitive weapons on a single planet. You have never faced a threat that could end your entire civilization in a single afternoon." Jake looked at the images floating in the air. He saw ships destroyed, planets devastated, millions dead. The scale was enormous, and he understood what the aliens were trying to tell him. Compared to their history, Earth's conflicts seemed small and insignificant. But they were wrong about one thing. "You think our scars do not matter because they happened on one world," Jake said quietly. "You think that because we fought each other instead of external enemies, our experience is worthless. We think you are unprepared," the Vraxian ambassador said, not unkindly. "You have courage, Commander. We see that. But courage without experience is simply enthusiasm. You need time to grow, to learn, to understand what the galaxy truly requires." "How much time?" Jake asked. "How many years before humanity is ready? 50? 100? 1,000? Zelvoth tilted its head in what might have been sympathy. "As long as it takes, young one. We will protect you until then. That is what the Galactic Defense Initiative does. We shield the younger species until they are ready to shield themselves." Jake felt frustration building in his chest, but he forced it down. Getting angry would accomplish nothing. These aliens meant well. They genuinely believed they were doing the right thing. They saw humanity as children who needed protection and guidance. They did not understand. "I request permission to present evidence to the assembly," Jake said formally. "I wish to show you the kind of scars that humanity carries. Then you can decide if we are truly unprepared." The aliens looked at each other, communicating in ways that Jake could not fully follow. Some used light signals, others made sounds his translator could not process. Finally, Zelvoth turned back to him. "Very well, Commander Morrison. We will grant you 1 hour to present your case, but understand that our decision is unlikely to change. We have seen many species request to join the defense initiative before they were ready. The answer is always the same. You must wait." "Thank you, Curator," Jake said. He pulled out his data tablet and began setting up his presentation. Around him, the alien ambassadors settled back into their seats, clearly expecting to be entertained by whatever the human wanted to show them. They had that same patient, amused expression that adults get when a child insists on showing them a drawing. Jake connected his tablet to the chamber's holographic system. The display flickered to life, showing an image of Earth rotating slowly in space. It looked beautiful, peaceful, a blue and green marble floating in the darkness. The aliens watched with polite interest. "Let me tell you about a place called Stalingrad," Jake began, and he started to zoom in on the planet's surface. "Let me tell you about what humans do when we are pushed to the edge. Let me count for you the scars that you think do not matter." The image focused on a city in ruins, and Jake Morrison began his history lesson. The aliens might not listen, they might not understand, but he would make them hear every word. Because somewhere out in the darkness of space, threats were gathering that the galaxy had not seen in centuries. And when those threats arrived, the galaxy would need people who remembered how to fight, how to suffer, and how to win despite impossible odds. The laughter in the chamber was about to fade. Jake would make sure of that. The grand chamber stretched out like a crystal cathedral, its walls made of materials that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Commander Jake Morrison walked slowly toward the center platform, his boots making soft sounds against the smooth floor. Above him, floating seats held representatives from 47 different alien species. Some had scales, some had fur, and some looked like they were made of pure light contained in glass bottles. They all watched him with expressions that Jake had learned to recognize over the past few weeks. They thought he was amusing, like a child who had wandered into a room full of adults. Jake stopped at the center and looked up at the assembled aliens. He wore his dress uniform, dark blue with silver buttons, and on his chest were the medals he had earned during his 20 years of military service. The aliens probably did not understand what those medals meant. They had not fought a real war in 800 years. The Vraxian ambassador leaned forward on her floating platform. She was huge, covered in dark armor that looked like an insect's shell with 6 eyes that blinked independently. When she spoke, her voice came through a translator device that made her sound calm and slightly amused. "Commander Morrison, you have requested that Earth be allowed to join the Galactic Defense Initiative. Is this correct?" "Yes, Ambassador," Jake replied, keeping his voice steady and professional. "Humanity wishes to contribute to the defense of the galaxy." A ripple of sound moved through the chamber. It took Jake a moment to realize that the aliens were laughing. Not the harsh, mocking laughter of enemies, but the gentle, condescending laughter of adults who find a child's ambitions endearing. The sound made something cold settle in Jake's stomach. High Curator Zelvoth rose from the largest platform. The creature was ancient, everyone knew that. It looked like a being made of crystal and light, with a body that seemed to shift colors as it moved. Zelvoth had been alive for over 2,000 years and had seen civilizations rise and fall. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of all those centuries. "Young human," Zelvoth said, and Jake hated that term more than anything. "We appreciate your enthusiasm, but you must understand our position. Earth has only possessed faster-than-light travel for 15 years. Your entire species has existed on a single world for all of your history. You have not faced the trials that forge true defenders of the galaxy." Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his expression neutral. He had expected this. His superior officers had warned him that the aliens would not take humanity seriously. But he had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that they would at least listen. "With respect, Curator," Jake began, "humanity has extensive military experience. We have fought countless wars and survived threats that pushed us to the edge of extinction. Another alien spoke up, this one from the Keltheran delegation. The Keltheran looked like a glowing ball of light inside a transparent sphere. Its voice came through musical, almost singing. Commander, we do not doubt that your species has experienced conflict. All young species fight among themselves. It is natural. But these are not the scars that matter in the larger galaxy. Zelvoth nodded its crystalline head in agreement. We have faced the devourer swarms, Commander Morrison. We have survived the plague wars of the Fourth Epoch, when a biological weapon spread across 300 systems. We have endured the silence when an entire arm of the galaxy went dark and we never discovered why. These are the trials that matter. The curator gestured with one translucent limb, and a holographic display appeared in the air between them. It showed scenes of ancient battles, alien fleets engaging strange enemies, worlds burning and being rebuilt. What has humanity endured that compares to this? You have fought with primitive weapons on a single planet. You have never faced a threat that could end your entire civilization in a single afternoon. Jake looked at the images floating in the air. He saw ships destroyed, planets devastated, millions dead. The scale was enormous, and he understood what the aliens were trying to tell him. Compared to their history, Earth's conflicts seemed small and insignificant. But they were wrong about one thing. You think our scars do not matter because they happened on one world? Jake said quietly. You think that because we fought each other instead of external enemies, our experience is worthless. We think you are unprepared, the Vraxian ambassador said, not unkindly. You have courage, Commander. We see that. But courage without experience is simply enthusiasm. You need time to grow, to learn, to understand what the galaxy truly requires. How much time? Jake asked. How many years before humanity is ready? 50, 100, 1,000? Zelvoth tilted its head in what might have been sympathy. As long as it takes, young one. We will protect you until then. That is what the Galactic Defense Initiative does. We shield the younger species until they are ready to shield themselves. Jake felt frustration building in his chest, but he forced it down. Getting angry would accomplish nothing. These aliens meant well. They genuinely believed they were doing the right thing. They saw humanity as children who needed protection and guidance. They did not understand. I request permission to present evidence to the Assembly, Jake said formally. I wish to show you the kind of scars that humanity carries. Then you can decide if we are truly unprepared. The aliens looked at each other, communicating in ways that Jake could not fully follow. Some used light signals, others made sounds his translator could not process. Finally, Zelvoth turned back to him. Very well, Commander Morrison. We will grant you 1 hour to present your case, but understand that our decision is unlikely to change. We have seen many species request to join the defense initiative before they were ready. The answer is always the same. You must wait. Thank you, Curator, Jake said. He pulled out his data tablet and began setting up his presentation. Around him, the alien ambassadors settled back into their seats, clearly expecting to be entertained by whatever the human wanted to show them. They had that same patient, amused expression that adults get when a child insists on showing them a drawing. Jake connected his tablet to the chamber's holographic system. The display flickered to life, showing an image of Earth rotating slowly in space. It looked beautiful, peaceful, a blue and green marble floating in the darkness. The aliens watched with polite interest. Let me tell you about a place called Stalingrad, Jake began, and he started to zoom in on the planet's surface. Let me tell you about what humans do when we are pushed to the edge. Let me count for you. The hologram filled the chamber with images of a frozen city. Snow covered everything, and the buildings were nothing but broken shells. Bodies lay in the streets, half buried in ice and rubble. Jake let the image hang there for a moment, letting the aliens take in the devastation. This is Stalingrad, Jake said quietly. Winter of 1942. 2 human armies met here and fought for control of this city. The battle lasted 6 months. 2 million people died. The Keltheran ambassador pulsed with what the translator rendered as confusion. A single city? Commander, while tragic, surely this does not compare to the great wars we have discussed. Let me finish, Jake said, and something in his voice made the aliens go quiet. The average life expectancy of a soldier deployed to Stalingrad was 24 hours. 1 day. That means if you arrived on Monday morning, you would probably be dead by Tuesday morning. The humans who fought here knew this. They went anyway. He changed the image to show soldiers fighting in the ruins. The temperature dropped to 40 degrees below zero. Food ran out. Ammunition ran out. Medicine ran out. The soldiers ate rats and boiled leather to stay alive. They fought building by building, room by room, sometimes just meters apart from their enemies. And they did this for 6 months. The Vraxian ambassador leaned forward, her multiple eyes focused on the display. What you describe is certainly terrible, Commander. But what is your point? That humans can endure suffering? Many species can endure suffering when they must. Jake nodded slowly. That is part of it. But the real point is this. The humans at Stalingrad were surrounded. They were outnumbered. They were starving and freezing and dying. Any rational military would have surrendered. But they did not surrender. They fought until they won. He pulled up another image, this one showing a different battlefield. This is the Somme, 4 months of fighting. 1 million casualties. This is Gettysburg, 3 days, 50,000 casualties. This is Verdun, 10 months, 700,000 casualties. The images came faster now, a grim parade of human warfare. This is Hiroshima after humans dropped an atomic bomb on it. This is Cambodia after genocide. This is Rwanda after genocide. This is New York after terrorist attacks. The chamber had gone very quiet. The aliens were not laughing anymore. They were staring at the images with something that looked like horror, the scars that you think do not matter. The image focused on a city in ruins, and Jake Morrison began his history lesson. The aliens might not listen, they might not understand, but he would make them hear every word. Because somewhere out in the darkness of space, threats were gathering that the galaxy had not seen in centuries. And when those threats arrived, the galaxy would need people who remembered how to fight, how to suffer, and how to win despite impossible odds. The laughter in the chamber was about to fade. Jake would make sure of that. Commander Lisa Hayes waited for Jake outside the grand chamber, leaning against one of the crystal walls that made up Station Kepler 9. She had watched the entire presentation from the observation gallery, and her expression told him everything he needed to know. They didn't grant it, Jake said. It was not a question. No, Lisa confirmed. She was Earth's diplomatic attaché, had been working with the Assembly for 2 years now, and she knew how these aliens thought. They thanked you politely, filed your presentation in their archives, and moved on to other business. Standard procedure for denying a request without causing offense. Jake started walking down the corridor, and Lisa fell into step beside him. The station hummed with energy around them, a masterpiece of technology that humanity could not even begin to replicate. Gardens floated in zero gravity, water flowed upward in impossible fountains, and the architecture bent in ways that hurt to look at too long. Everything here spoke of civilizations that had moved far beyond humanity's current struggles. Did you really expect them to say yes? Lisa asked gently. I hoped, Jake admitted. Foolish, maybe, but I hoped they would see reason. They reached a viewing port that looked out over the Kepler Nebula, a swirling mass of colors that surrounded the station like a protective blanket. Jake stopped and stared out at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, colonies were going silent. People were dying, and the galaxy's great powers were forming committees to study the problem. The Vraxian ambassador used to be a soldier, Jake said quietly. Did you know that? 300 years ago, she fought in the Devourer swarms. She saw real combat, but that was so long ago that she has forgotten what it feels like. And now she is a diplomat, Lisa said. They all are. They evolved past the need for warriors. That is not a bad thing, Jake. I never said it was bad, Jake replied, but it makes them vulnerable. They have spent 800 years building a civilization based on peace and cooperation. That is admirable. But it means they have no one left who remembers how to fight a real war. Over the next 6 weeks, Jake watched the situation deteriorate. Another system went silent in the Perseus arm, then another. The number of missing colonies rose to 7, with a combined population of over 30 billion. The Assembly held emergency sessions, but their responses were slow and careful. They sent scientific vessels to investigate. They established monitoring protocols. They formed more committees. Jake attended every session from the observation gallery, biting his tongue as the aliens debated sensor configurations and research methodologies. Not once did anyone suggest preparing for military action. Not once did anyone use the word enemy or attack. They treated it like a natural disaster, something to be studied and understood rather than fought. Meanwhile, Earth had not been idle. Admiral Peter Grant, commander of the newly formed Human Defense Fleet, had been coordinating with Jake since the presentation. While the galaxy's powers theorized and debated, humanity built warships. The RSS Endeavour finished construction in orbit around Mars. She was joined by two sister ships, the RSS Defiance and the RSS Resolute. All three were small by galactic standards, barely frigate class, but they carried weapons and tactics developed from thousands of years of human warfare. Their crews trained constantly, running combat drills that the peaceful aliens would have found disturbing. The Keltheran delegation filed a complaint about our military buildup. Lisa told Jake over a secure communication channel one evening. They say it violates the spirit of galactic cooperation. They think we are being paranoid. Jake was in his quarters on the station, reviewing tactical data with Captain Ryan Bell, commander of the Endeavour. Ryan was a veteran of the old Earth navies, had served 20 years before transferring to the new Space Force. His weathered face bore the scars of a man who had seen real combat. "What do you think, Captain?" Jake asked. Ryan studied the star chart spread across Jake's desk, showing the systems that had gone dark. "I think something killed 30 billion people across 7 systems, and nobody here is treating it like the threat it is. They are acting like scientists studying an interesting phenomenon, not like people whose civilization might be under attack." "The Ancestral Dominion released a statement yesterday," Lisa said through the comm. "They believe the disappearances are caused by some kind of exotic radiation pulse, maybe a dying star or dimensional anomaly. They are quite confident it is natural. Did they ask the 30 billion dead people if they agree?" Ryan said dryly. Before anyone could respond, the lights in Jake's quarters flickered. Then they flickered again. Then a sound began to build, starting so low that Jake felt it in his bones before he heard it. It was a wailing note that seemed to come from everywhere at once, rising in pitch until it became almost unbearable. Jake was on his feet immediately. "That's the emergency alert." Lisa's voice came through the comm, now urgent and sharp. "Jake, something is happening. The station's defense systems just activated. I'm seeing reports of unidentified ships entering the system." Jake and Ryan were already running toward the command center. The corridors of Station Kepler 9, usually peaceful and quiet, had erupted into chaos. Aliens ran in every direction, some toward escape pods, others toward duty stations they probably had not used in decades. Automated announcements blared in multiple languages, all saying variations of the same thing: hostile contact, all personnel to emergency stations. They reached the command center to find it packed with panicked ambassadors and confused technicians. The main display showed the tactical situation, and Jake felt his blood run cold. A massive vessel had dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly above the station, so close that its shadow fell across half the structure. The ship was enormous, easily 10 times larger than anything humanity had built, and its hull looked wrong somehow, organic, like it had been grown rather than constructed. "All stations, Emergency Protocol 7, came High Curator Zelvoth's voice over the station-wide channel. For the first time since Jake had met the ancient being, it sounded afraid. "Unidentified hostile forces have entered the Kepler system. They are not responding to hails. They are not—" The transmission cut off as the massive ship opened fire. Energy beams lanced down toward the station's shields, weapons of a type Jake had never seen before. The shields held, but the entire station shuddered with the impact. Lights flickered. Gravity wavered for a moment before stabilizing. Through the viewing ports, Jake saw space tear open as more ships arrived. Not just one or two, but dozens of them. Then hundreds. They poured through what looked like wounds in reality itself, each vessel bristling with weapons and covered in that same organic armor. The command center descended into chaos. Ambassadors who had spent centuries in peaceful deliberation now shouted over each other, trying to coordinate a defense they had no experience mounting. The Vraxian ambassador was bellowing orders, her diplomatic composure shattered. The Keltheran delegation pulsed in rapid, panicked bursts of light that the translators could not keep up with. Jake pushed through the crowd to the tactical display. "Captain Bell, where's the Endeavour?" Ryan's voice came through his calm despite the circumstances. "We're 30 minutes out at maximum burn, Commander. We detected the spatial distortions and started moving the moment they appeared. But the station's shields won't last 30 minutes. You need to buy time." Jake turned to find High Curator Zelvoth standing nearby, its crystalline form flickering rapidly through colors Jake had never seen before. The ancient being looked lost, overwhelmed by a situation it had never prepared for. "Curator," Jake said sharply, cutting through the noise. "You need to evacuate the station. Get everyone to the escape pods and scatter. Make yourselves hard targets." Zelvoth turned to him, and Jake saw something in the alien's expression that made his chest tighten. It was the look of someone who had just realized they had made a terrible mistake. "Our defense fleet is being assembled," Zelvoth said, its voice shaking, "but it will take hours to coordinate proper formation, to establish command protocols, to—" "You don't have hours," Jake snapped, then forcing himself to speak more calmly. "With respect, Curator, this is what my people do. This is what we have trained for. Let me help." For a long moment, Zelvoth stared at him. 800 years of peace warred with the reality of weapons fire hammering the station's shields. Finally, the ancient being nodded. "What do you need?" "Control of the station's weapons," Jake said immediately, "and access to every ship currently in the Kepler system, regardless of whether they are military vessels." The Varaxian ambassador overheard and pushed through the crowd toward them. "We have 18 research vessels in the system, 43 cargo haulers, 7 luxury cruisers. None of them are armed, Commander." Jake was already moving toward the weapons console, his fingers flying over controls that were designed for alien hands, but would have to work for human ones. "Everything is a weapon if you use it correctly. Lisa, coordinate the evacuation. Get all non-essential personnel to the far side of the station, away from the enemy fleet. Prioritize children and anyone who cannot help with the defense." The station shuddered again as another salvo hit the shields. The display showed their shield strength dropping, 70%. Then 65. Then 60. They were running. Jake's hands moved across the weapons console with practiced speed. The station's defensive systems were old, designed more for show than actual combat, but they would have to do. Around him, the command center buzzed with barely controlled panic as aliens tried to coordinate a defense they had not practiced in centuries. "Research vessel Quantum Dream," Jake spoke into the comm system, his voice calm and clear despite the chaos. "I need you to deploy your sensor arrays at these coordinates." He transmitted the data directly. "Create a false sensor echo. Make them think there's a fleet approaching from the south." There was a pause, then a confused voice replied. "Commander, our arrays are designed for scientific observation, not military deception." "We cannot—" "You can and you will," Jake interrupted. "You have the most powerful sensors in this system. Deploy them now or watch everyone die. Your choice." Another salvo hammered the station. The shield display dropped to 55%. Through the viewing ports, Jake could see the enemy fleet spreading out, surrounding the station like a pack of wolves circling wounded prey. Their ships moved with purpose but without much sophistication. They came in straight lines, concentrated fire poorly, wasted shots on targets that were already disabled. They fought like bullies who had never faced real resistance. "Cargo hauler Pride of Kelthera," Jake continued, pulling up the manifest of every ship in the system. "You're carrying deuterium fuel for the outer colonies. I need you to vent it in a controlled stream along this trajectory." "Commander Morrison," came the shocked reply. "That fuel is worth millions of credits. We cannot simply—" "Credits won't matter if you're dead," Jake said flatly. "Vent the fuel. Research ship Scientific Endeavor. Are you equipped with high-powered lasers for geological sampling?" "We are," came a more composed voice. "Good. When the Pride vents its fuel, I need you to ignite it with your lasers." There was a long pause. "You want us to create an explosion in space?" "I want you to create a wall of fire between us and them," Jake corrected. "Buy us time. That's all we need right now. Time." The station shuddered again. Shield strength at 50%. The enemy ships were getting closer, and Jake could see more of them arriving through those tiers in space. Dozens more, maybe hundreds. This was not a raid or a scouting force. This was an invasion fleet. All luxury cruisers, Jake broadcast, pulling up data on the 7 civilian vessels that catered to wealthy tourists. "I need you to do something that will sound insane." Captain Ryan Bell's voice cut in over a private channel. "Let me guess, Commander. You want them to ram the enemy ships?" "Negative," Jake replied, allowing himself the smallest smile despite the situation. "Luxury cruisers have the best engines and shields in the civilian fleet. They're built for speed and comfort. I want you to use that speed. Buzz the enemy vessels at maximum velocity, close enough to make them flinch. Draw their fire. Make them waste ammunition tracking you. They'll think we're crazy. Lisa said from her position coordinating the evacuation. Good, Jake said. People hesitate when fighting crazy opponents. They make mistakes. The first of his improvised tactics began to take effect. The Quantum Dream deployed its massive sensor arrays, and suddenly the enemy fleet's instruments showed a large force approaching from an unexpected vector. Jake watched on the tactical display as half the enemy ships broke formation and turned to face this phantom threat. It would not fool them for long, but it bought precious minutes. The Pride of Kelthara vented its deuterium fuel in a massive cloud that spread across space between the station and the advancing enemy. When the scientific Endeavor hit it with their geological lasers, the result was spectacular. A wall of flame erupted in the void, not a true explosion in the traditional sense, but a rapidly expanding field of superheated gas that scrambled sensors and forced the enemy to adjust their approach. "Shields at 40%, called out one of the station technicians, an alien Jake did not recognize. "All luxury cruisers, begin your attack runs now," Jake ordered. What happened next would have been comical if the stakes were not so deadly. 7 vessels designed to carry rich tourists in comfort suddenly became the most aggressive ships in the battle. They dove through the enemy formation at speeds that would have made their passengers sick, their shields flaring as they absorbed glancing hits. They were not trying to do damage, just to confuse and distract. And it worked. The enemy fleet found itself chasing targets that were too fast to hit reliably, wasting ammunition on ships that danced away before the shots connected. Jake watched the tactical display and saw something important. The enemy was getting frustrated. They were breaking formation, pursuing individual cruisers instead of maintaining their organized assault on the station. "Shields at 30%, the technician announced. "Endeavor's entering weapons range." Ryan's voice came through. "Commander, I hope you have a plan for when we arrive." "Target the biggest ship," Jake said. "The one that looks like a command vessel. Hit it with everything you have. That's not much of a plan. It's the best I've got. Sometimes you just have to hit them hard and see what happens." The RSS Endeavor dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the battle zone. She was small, barely a fifth the size of the enemy command ship. But she was built by humans who understood violence at a fundamental level. Her weapons were different from anything the galaxy used. Instead of energy beams, she carried railguns that fired solid tungsten projectiles at speeds that turned them into relativistic weapons. Instead of shields designed to deflect other energy weapons, she had armor that could absorb kinetic impacts. When the Endeavor opened fire, the effect was immediate and devastating. The enemy command ship's shields, optimized to deflect the energy weapons that the galaxy had used for centuries, did absolutely nothing against solid metal moving at a significant fraction of light speed. Tungsten slugs punched through the organic armor like paper. Hull plating cracked and peeled away. Secondary explosions blossomed along the massive vessel's flanks. The enemy fleet hesitated. Just for a moment, but it was enough. "All vessels," Jake broadcast on every channel, "follow the Endeavor's lead. We don't need to destroy them. We just need to hurt them enough that they decide we're not worth the cost. Hit them hard. Hit them fast. Show them that this station has teeth." The research vessels turned their scientific instruments into weapons. High-powered lasers meant for drilling core samples sliced into enemy hulls. The cargo haulers used their massive engines to ram damaged ships, their shields just strong enough to survive the impact. Even the luxury cruisers got brave, focusing their fire on already damaged vessels. It was not pretty. It was not elegant. It was desperate improvisation against a numerically superior force. But it was working. The enemy fleet was taking damage it had not expected. Ships that had arrived expecting easy prey were finding something very different. "Shields at 20%, the technician called out. Jake watched the tactical display with intense focus. The enemy was pulling back, regrouping. They had not expected resistance like this. They had thought the station would fall in minutes. But now they were reconsidering. The RSS Defiance and RSS Resolute arrived, adding their firepower to the battle. 3 human warships against hundreds of enemy vessels should have been suicide, but the 3 ships fought with a coordination and aggression that caught the enemy off guard. They covered each other, concentrated fire on damaged targets, and never stayed still long enough to be easy prey. "Shields at 15%, came the warning. "Come on," Jake muttered, watching the enemy fleet. "You've taken losses. You weren't expecting a fight. Cut your losses and run. Be smart about this. As if hearing his thoughts, the enemy fleet began to withdraw, slowly at first, then with more urgency as the human ships continued to hammer them. The massive command ship, trailing atmosphere from multiple hull breaches, turned and began moving toward the spatial rifts it had arrived through. The rest of the fleet followed. "Shields at 10%, the technician said, but her voice held a note of hope now. Jake watched as the enemy vessels retreated through the tiers in space. Within minutes, the entire fleet had vanished, leaving behind only wreckage and the slowly expanding clouds of atmosphere from destroyed ships. The command center was silent, every being staring at the tactical display in disbelief. They had won. Against all odds, with improvised tactics and desperate courage, they had held the station. High Curator Zelvoth turned to Jake, its crystalline form still flickering with agitation. "Commander Morrison, you saved us all." Jake shook his head slowly. "No, Curator. We all saved each other. But this was just the first battle. They'll be back. Probably with more ships. Definitely with a better plan." He looked around at the assembled aliens, seeing the fear and shock on their faces. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" The galaxy had stopped laughing at humanity. Now they were learning what it meant to count scars. The Battle of Kepler 9 lasted 7 hours from first contact to the enemy's retreat. When it was over, Jake Morrison stood in the damaged command center and counted the cost. 42 ships destroyed, 8,000 beings dead. Station Kepler 9's outer sections bore deep scars from weapons fire, and her shields had failed completely in the final hour before the enemy withdrew. It should have been worse. Every tactical model Jake had run predicted total destruction within 30 minutes. The fact that the station still existed was due to improvisation, desperation, and the willingness of civilian vessels to become warriors when they had no other choice. High Curator Zelvoth found Jake in the observation deck 3 hours after the battle ended. The ancient being moved slowly, its crystalline form dimmed with exhaustion that went beyond the physical. Jake understood that feeling. It was the weight that came from making impossible choices and living with the consequences. "Commander Morrison," Zelvoth said quietly, "the Assembly wishes to speak with you." Jake turned from the viewing port where he had been watching repair crews work on the station's damaged sections. "I imagine they do. They want to grant humanity full membership in the Galactic Defense Initiative," Zelvoth continued. "More than that. The Council of Defense has requested that Earth provide military advisors to all member species. They want to learn from you." "They want to learn how to kill," Jake said, his voice hollow. "They want to learn how to survive," Zelvoth corrected gently. "There is a difference, as you once told me." Jake looked at the ancient being, really looked at it. Zelvoth had witnessed the birth of stars, had seen civilizations rise and fall, had lived through wars that made human history look brief and small. But today the curator looked old in a way that had nothing to do with years. "You showed us your scars," Zelvoth said. "Stalingrad and the Somme and all the terrible things your species has endured. I did not understand then. I thought you were trying to impress us with your capacity for suffering. I thought you were glorifying violence." "I wasn't," Jake said. "I know that now," Zelvoth replied. "You were warning us. You were showing us the price of survival. We laughed at you because we could not imagine paying such a price. We had forgotten that sometimes the universe demands payment whether we want to pay it or not." Captain Ryan Bell entered the observation deck, followed by Lisa Hayes. Both looked as exhausted as Jake felt. Behind them came representatives from a dozen different species, all wearing expressions that mixed gratitude with something harder to define. Shame maybe, or respect earned the hard way. The Vraxian ambassador approached, her 6 eyes focused on Jake. "I fought in the Devourer swarms 300 years ago. I was a warrior once. I thought I remembered what that meant." She paused, her mandibles clicking softly. "I had forgotten. But you, Commander Morrison, you remembered for all of us." "We never had the luxury of forgetting," Jake said simply. Over the following weeks, the galaxy mobilized for a war none of them had wanted to fight. The Assembly transformed from a deliberative body focused on peace and cooperation into a military command structure. It was painful to watch. Species that had not maintained standing armies in centuries suddenly had to remember how. Weapons that had been stored in museums were brought back into service. Ships designed for exploration were retrofitted with armor and guns. And through it all, humans were there, teaching and advising. Captain Ryan Bell took command of a multi-species battle group, and began drilling them in tactics that seemed brutal and direct, compared to the elegant strategies the aliens preferred. Lisa Hayes worked with the diplomatic corps, helping them understand that in wartime decisions had to be made quickly rather than perfectly. Admiral Peter Grant arrived with more human warships and began establishing a command structure that could actually respond to threats in real time. Commander Jake Morrison became Admiral Morrison, head of the Joint Galactic Defense Force. It was a position he had never wanted, commanding resources he had never dreamed of having. But he accepted it because someone had to, and because humans understood something the others were still learning. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler 9, Jake stood before the Galactic Assembly again. This time the chamber was different. Many of the floating seats were empty, their occupants away commanding defense fleets or coordinating military buildups. Those who remained looked different too, harder, less certain of their place in the universe. "You asked me once what scars humanity carries," Jake said to the assembled delegates. He did not need notes or displays anymore. They knew, they had seen. "I showed you our wars and our struggles and our darkest moments. But those are not the scars that matter most." He pulled up a hologram, and this time it showed something different. Images of humans rebuilding cities after they had been destroyed. Images of peace treaties and reconciliations. Images of former enemies working together, building something new from the ashes of what had been lost. "These are the scars that matter," Jake continued. "Not just the wounds we received, but what we learned from them. We learned that survival means more than fighting. It means knowing when to fight, how to fight, and what you are fighting for. It means remembering the cost so you never pay it lightly." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings from across the galaxy. "You evolved past war, and that is admirable. That is something every species should strive for. But evolution is not about forgetting where you came from. It is about carrying those lessons forward. We are here to help you remember. Not because we are better than you, but because we are still close enough to our violent past to teach you how to face yours." High Curator Zelvoth rose from its seat. "Then teach us, Admiral Morrison. Help us remember what we must do to survive. And perhaps when this war is over, you can help us remember how to find peace again." Jake nodded slowly. "That is a deal I can make, Curator. But understand this, the galaxy has changed. The enemy we faced at Kepler 9 is just the beginning. There will be more conflicts, more struggles, more scars. Then we will face them together," Zelvoth said. "And when future generations ask what we learned from humanity, we will tell them this. We learned that the greatest strength is not in never falling, but in rising every time you do." The Assembly voted unanimously to establish the Joint Galactic Defense Force with humanity as its founding military advisors. It was a moment of unity born from crisis, of ancient species learning from young ones, of the galaxy finally understanding that survival sometimes requires you to count your scars and learn from them. As Jake left the chamber that day, Lisa walked beside him through corridors that still bore repair marks from the battle. "Do you think we can win this war?" she asked quietly. Jake thought about Stalingrad, where soldiers fought for 6 months in conditions that should have killed them all. He thought about the Somme and Gettysburg, and all the impossible battles humanity had fought. He thought about every time humans had been told the odds were against them, and had won anyway through sheer stubborn refusal to give up. "We have won before," he said, "against worse odds with less help for smaller stakes. The galaxy has resources we never dreamed of, technology that makes our best weapons look primitive. What we bring is something simpler, something they lost along the way." "What is that?" Jake smiled, though there was no humor in it. "The absolute stubborn refusal to give up no matter what. That is the human advantage. That is our scar. And now it is theirs too." Above them, the stars wheeled through space, indifferent to the struggles of the beings below. But among those stars, something had changed. The galaxy had been at peace for 800 years, and in that peace they had forgotten what their ancestors knew about survival. Humanity remembered, and now they were teaching the galaxy to remember too, not through lectures or history lessons, but through shared struggle and sacrifice, through standing together when the darkness came and refusing to break. The enemy fleet had retreated after the Battle of Kepler 9, but everyone knew they would return. Stronger, better prepared, more determined. The war was just beginning, and it would be long and hard and costly. Many would die. Many more would be changed by the experience, But for the first time in 800 years, the Galactic Assembly was preparing to fight. Not because they wanted to, but because they had finally understood that sometimes the universe gives you only two choices: adapt or die. They had chosen to adapt. And humanity, with all its scars and hard-won lessons, would teach them how. The galaxy's laughter had faded completely now. In its place was something new: determination, purpose. The grim understanding that came from counting scars and deciding that the next one would not be fatal. Jake Morrison looked out at the stars and felt the weight of what was coming, but he also felt something else. Hope. Not the naive hope of peace, but the harder hope of survival. The kind of hope that got you through Stalingrad and the Somme and every other impossible situation. The kind of hope that said, "We have survived worse than this, and we will survive again." And this time they would not survive alone. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 9, the war continued to spread across the galaxy like a slow fire. The enemy, which the Assembly's scientists had designated as the Void Collective, attacked systematically and without warning. They would tear holes in space, pour through with overwhelming numbers, destroy everything in their path, and then vanish before reinforcements could arrive. It was a strategy designed to create fear and chaos, and it was working. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the command center of the newly constructed Galactic Defense Station Alpha, watching tactical displays that showed the current state of the conflict. Red markers indicated systems under attack. Yellow showed systems that had recently been hit and were still recovering. Green represented secure territories, and there were far too few green markers on the map. "We are losing ground," High Curator Zelvoth said, standing beside Jake and studying the same displays. "For every system we defend, they attack 3 more. We cannot be everywhere at once." "No military force can be everywhere," Jake replied. "That is why you need to change your thinking. You are still trying to protect everything. That is impossible. You need to accept that some places will fall and focus on holding what matters most." The curator's crystalline form flickered with distress. "You ask us to abandon our colonies? To let our people die? I am asking you to make hard choices," Jake said bluntly. "That is what war requires. You evacuate who you can, you hold what you must, and you accept that perfect solutions do not exist. Every human general in history has had to make these choices. Now you have to make them too." It was the lesson the galaxy was learning slowly and painfully. War was not clean. It was not fair. It did not care about good intentions or diplomatic protocols. War was about choosing between bad options and living with the consequences. Captain Ryan Bell had taken command of the 3rd Defense Fleet, a mixed force of human warships and retrofitted alien vessels. He sent regular reports back to Jake, and they all told the same story. The alien crews were learning, but they were learning by making mistakes that cost lives. They hesitated when they should attack. They followed outdated rules of engagement when they should adapt. They expected the enemy to fight fairly, and the enemy did not. "The Keltheran cruiser Brightness of Dawn was destroyed yesterday," Ryan reported during their weekly communication. They broadcast a distress signal when they were hit, hoping the enemy would allow them to evacuate. The enemy used the signal to locate their escape pods and destroyed them all. 4,000 dead because they expected mercy. Jake closed his eyes briefly. "Make sure all ships know. The Void Collective does not take prisoners. They do not accept surrender. They do not show mercy. Broadcast that on every channel until every crew member understands it." "Already done," Ryan said. "But it is hard for them, Admiral. These species have not fought an enemy like this in centuries. They are not used to fighting something that wants them extinct." "Then they need to learn fast," Jake said, "because the alternative is extinction." Lisa Hayes had taken on a different role in the war effort. She coordinated with the civilian populations, helping them understand what was happening and preparing them for what might come. It was thankless work. People did not want to hear that their peaceful lives were ending. They did not want to build shelters or learn evacuation procedures or stockpile emergency supplies. They wanted things to go back to normal. "There are protests on 12 different worlds," Lisa told Jake during one of their private meetings. "They say we are being too aggressive, that we are provoking the enemy unnecessarily. They want the Assembly to try negotiating. The enemy has never responded to any communication attempt," Jake said tiredly. "They do not negotiate. They destroy." "What part of that do these protesters not understand?" "The part where their comfortable lives end," Lisa replied. You have to understand, Jake. These civilizations have known peace for so long that they have forgotten what the alternative looks like. To them, war is something that happens in history books, not in their living rooms. Jake knew she was right, but it frustrated him nonetheless. Humans had never had that luxury. Even in times of relative peace, there had always been the knowledge that violence could return at any moment. It made humans paranoid, yes, but it also made them prepared. The Vraxian ambassador, who had taken the name Commander Vex and returned to active military service, had become one of Jake's most valuable allies. She remembered the old ways, and she was teaching her people to remember too. Her battle group had won 3 significant engagements against the Void Collective, using tactics that combined human aggression with Vraxian durability. "Your species fights with anger," Vex told Jake during a strategy meeting. "My people used to fight that way too, before we evolved past it. Now I understand that we did not evolve past anger. We buried it, but anger has its uses in war. It keeps you fighting when logic says you should give up. Anger can also make you reckless," Jake warned. "You need to balance it with discipline. Fight smart, not just hard." "That is why we need you humans," Vex replied. "You understand both. You fight with passion, but also with planning. It is a difficult balance to maintain." The war dragged on through months that turned into a year. The Void Collective's attacks became more sophisticated as they learned from their failures. They began targeting supply lines and communication hubs instead of just population centers. They started using the galaxy's own territory against it, attacking through unexpected routes and retreating before a proper response could be organized. But the galaxy was learning too. Species that had forgotten how to fight were remembering. Shipyards that had built pleasure cruisers now built warships. Scientists who had studied peaceful phenomena now developed weapons. Diplomats who had spent careers negotiating trade agreements now coordinated military campaigns. And everywhere, human advisors taught them the lessons that humanity had learned at such terrible cost. How to fight when outnumbered. How to retreat without breaking. How to turn every loss into a lesson for the next battle. How to keep going when everything said you should give up. Jake Morrison was promoted again, though he told them he did not want the promotion. He became Supreme Commander of Galactic Defense, answering only to the Assembly itself. It was a position that should have gone to one of the ancient species with their centuries of experience, but they gave it to a human who had been in space for less than 2 years. "You understand something we forgot," Zelvoth explained when Jake questioned the decision. "You understand that war is not about grand strategy or perfect tactics. It is about will, about refusing to break no matter how hard you are hit. That is what we need now. That is what you can teach us." The turning point came during the Battle of the Drax system, where the Void Collective committed its largest fleet yet in an attempt to destroy the major shipyards located there. If the shipyards fell, the galaxy's ability to replace losses would be crippled. Jake knew this. The enemy knew this. It was going to be the biggest battle since the war began. Jake assembled every ship he could spare and took personal command of the defense. The human contingent was now 20 warships, supported by over 200 alien vessels that had been trained in human tactics. It was still not enough to match the enemy fleet, but it would have to do. "All ships," Jake broadcast as the enemy began arriving through their spatial rifts. "This is Admiral Morrison. The enemy thinks they can break us here. They think if they hit us hard enough, we will give up and let them take this system. They are wrong. Today we show them what the galaxy looks like when it refuses to break." The battle lasted 14 hours. It was brutal, exhausting, and costly. Ships on both sides were destroyed by the dozens. At one point, Jake's flagship took a direct hit that knocked out half its systems, and he had to coordinate the defense from backup stations, while fire suppression crews fought to keep the ship from being destroyed. But the galaxy held. Every time the enemy thought they had broken through, another ship would move to fill the gap. Every time a vessel was crippled, its crew fought on from escape pods or used their dying ship as a weapon. The lessons humanity had taught them were being put into practice, and it was working. When the Void Collective finally retreated, they left behind more destroyed ships than they took with them. It was the first time the galaxy had won a major engagement without human ships doing most of the heavy fighting. It was proof that the lessons were taking hold. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his damaged flagship and watched the enemy fleet disappear through their spatial rifts. Around him, his crew cheered and celebrated. But Jake did not celebrate. He counted the cost. 60 ships destroyed, 20,000 dead. The Drax shipyard saved but heavily damaged. It was a victory, but the price had been steep. We won, Commander Vex said, her voice carrying triumph mixed with exhaustion. We survived, Jake corrected. That is not quite the same thing as winning, but it is enough for today. High Curator Zelvoth contacted him a few hours later after the immediate crisis had passed. Admiral Morrison, the Assembly wishes to express their gratitude. You have taught us well. We are becoming what we need to be. You are becoming warriors again, Jake said quietly. I hope you remember why you stopped being warriors in the first place. I hope when